As we record this, America
Mhm.
is coming into the third month of COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us have been quarantined at home all this time, connecting with others only through screens, while the unemployment rate climbs up into the range of maybe even 20%. At the same time, we're now into the 11th day of protests spurred by the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis police and the widespread acknowledgement that the damage that racism has made on our society. Nerves are frayed and energy is high. From a psychological perspective, you might say that many of us are being triggered by events and living in a state of fight or flight. This makes it a particularly appropriate topic for us to talk about with our guest today, Dr. Julie Holland. She's the author of several books, including the bestseller Moody Bitches, and is the editor of The Pot Book and Ecstasy, the Complete Guide. Her new book, just being released, is Good Chemistry, the Science of Connection from Soul to Psychedelics. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, human connection. Why is connection so important?
Yeah, connection. Remember that? Remember when we used to connect? So what I talk about in Good Chemistry is that we are sort of programmed or hardwired to be social. Our species is categorized as obligatorily gregarious, which means we are obligated to be friendly and affable and get along and cooperate. And we're designed to get pleasure from connecting and cooperating, because without it, our species dies out. So in Good Chemistry, I try to explain how connection puts the body into a different mode from fight or flight. You know, when we're stressed out, or, you know, I think a good example is, like, let's say your kitchen's on fire, right? Like, you're just going to focus on the fire or getting out of the kitchen. It's not a time to pick up the phone and see who's calling. You know, you're not going to be social. You've got work to do. So when we are in fight or flight, our bodies are really designed to focus on either attacking or running away. And it's not focused at that time on being social. But we need to be social in order to survive, right? We need to mate. We need to bond with our babies. We need to be altruistic and empathetic, or we're not going to make it. So we get pleasure from these states of connection, and these states of connection pull us out of fight or flight and put us into the other side of survival, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. So fight or flight is sympathetic, and parasympathetic is when you rest and digest. And very importantly, it's when your body can repair itself. The only time your body runs any of these repair mechanisms, really, is when you are in this rest and digest and repair state, which is called the parasympathetic state.
So in the book, you describe how loneliness actually affects us not only emotionally, but physically. That it has a physical aspect to it, which actually is very damaging to human health.
Right. So chronic loneliness puts us in fight or flight. When we are socially isolated, we are in fight or flight. If we are worried about being ostracized, we are in fight or flight. So loneliness is really bad for your body, and social isolation does quite a few things. It deranges our metabolism, right? It makes us fat. It deranges our sleep-wake cycles, and we get insomnia. And also, it creates problems where we can't learn adequately. And this is something I focus on a lot in Good Chemistry, because people don't understand this or know it. But social isolation interferes with the molecular process of learning. There's a combination of psychological and physiological effects, and they're all bad.
This is one of the things about the book that I found so inspiring and really interesting in a number of ways, that there is a social good to people being in connection with each other, emotionally connected and physically healthy. That when you're in a place where you're not in para, as you describe it in the book, you call it the parasympathetic.
Para, we have the ability to connect. And when we connect, it puts us in para. So it's a lot of cycles, right? And this is something I talk about in Good Chemistry. Is, you know, we have this sense that, like, our hormones affect our behavior, but really things happen in our environment that trigger our hormones.
Well, what you realize is that we need to be in para in order to have a democracy.
We do. Our country needs to be in para,
The
right?
country needs to be in para in the sense
right.
that when you commit to a partnership, it's important to be in para in order to maintain the intimacy and to trust the connection and hold the connection.
Right.
As long as we're, as a country, working through complicated issues that can trigger fight or flight, left and right, our ability to step back from that state in order to see the other, to see the one that we're arguing with, to see the one that we're demonizing as having a legitimate perspective that we need to take into account and listen to and understand in a human-to-human way, requires our having the social skills, or perhaps it's the psychological tools that can move us into a place of openness for that kind of connection.
Right. Catherine McLean, when she was at Hopkins, did this great research showing that these psychedelic experiences that people were having at Hopkins, when you measured some personality traits before the psilocybin experience and after, there was a significant increase in the measurement of openness. So openness to new experiences, openness to new ideas, right, to new information. And so you could make a case that psychedelics can help us sort of bridge the gap, that's happening with the polarization in the country. One of the potential titles for this book was actually These United States, because I wanted to talk about states of oneness, and how good they are for our bodies and for our minds, and how if America or United States could actually come together and be united, it would be good for all of our sort of physiologies. It's good for the whole country. It's good for each person in the country to feel like they belong to one thing and that everybody is cooperating and on the same page. And obviously right now is just an extreme example of how divided and polarized we feel.
In the wake of the pandemic, and now I think this, clearly new wave of traumatic experience that the protests are bringing on for people in all kinds of different ways. You feel like the country is entering a place where there's going to be so many people traumatized by this whole period. Right. And, an ongoing challenge around the economics coming up as well. There have been some psychiatrists who've been saying that the use of psychedelics at this time should be become much more widespread in the therapeutic context. That the government should look at this as a crisis that needs to be addressed with the tools that psychedelic therapists have been developing, which are now being shown to be so effective in clinical trials, and also clearly anecdotally. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that's
well, I don't hear a lot of psychiatrists, sort of making a call for that. But clearly, when the pandemic started, the first wave of trauma was really hitting the medical first responders, and obviously those people who got sick or their family members were sick. And yes, now we're having this whole second wave of trauma with the demonstrations. And also, I think it's important to acknowledge there has been ongoing racial trauma in this country for centuries. So it's high time that we talk about how traumatic it is to be a person of color in our country. So yes, there's a lot of people who have post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a lot of people who are traumatized. And right now, if you're not traumatized, you're not paying attention, Like, how could you not be traumatized by everything that's happening now?
Julie Holland, the book is Good Chemistry. Get it now. Hot off the press.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Like June 16th. It was absolutely my pleasure to speak with you, Ken, and Lucid News. Congratulations and good luck on your new venture.
I appreciate that.
Which is Lucid News, which is what I'm saying.
This is where we are right now on Lucid News. Appreciate that, and expect you to come back for more.